The vast emptiness of space stretched out before the massive alien fleet. Their ships, each the size of a small moon, moved in perfect formation. The aliens called themselves the Zorth, and they were on a mission to expand their already impressive empire. Admiral Krastel stood on the bridge of the flagship, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic displays. He was tall, even for a Zorth, with blue-green skin that shimmered under the soft lights. His lower arms were crossed over his chest, while his upper arms operated the control panels. "Admiral," one of the junior officers called out, "we're picking up some unusual readings ahead." Krastel's head turned sharply. "Unusual how?" "It appears to be a fleet, sir, but it's tiny compared to ours." The Admiral's mouth curled into what passed for a smile among his species. "Bring it up on the main screen," he ordered. The image that appeared made Krastel blink all 4 of his eyes in surprise. There, against the backdrop of stars, was indeed a fleet, but it was so small that at first he thought it must be a mistake. "Are you sure your instruments are working correctly?" he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. The junior officer nodded nervously. "Yes, Admiral. We've checked and double-checked. That's definitely what we're seeing." Krastel stared at the screen, then let out a loud, rumbling laugh that shook his entire body. Soon, the rest of the bridge crew joined in, their laughter echoing through the massive ship. "Look at those tiny things," Krastel exclaimed between fits of laughter. "They're barely bigger than our scout ships." Another officer chimed in. "Maybe they're escape pods that got lost." This sent another wave of laughter through the bridge. Krastel had to hold onto his console to keep from doubling over. As the laughter died down, the Admiral wiped a tear from one of his eyes. "Ah, that was a good joke. Now, let's get serious. What species are we dealing with here?" The junior officer checked his readings. "According to our database, sir, they appear to be human ships." "Humans?" Krastel's tone was dismissive. "I've heard of them. Barely made it out of their own solar system, didn't they? And now they think they can face us with these toys." He zoomed in on one of the human ships. It was sleek and streamlined, nothing like the bulky, intimidating designs of the Zorth fleet. To Krastel, it looked more like a pleasure craft than a warship. "Sir," another officer spoke up, "the humans are hailing us." Krastel waved one of his upper arms dismissively. "Oh, this should be entertaining. Put them through." The main screen changed to show the interior of the human ship. A single figure stood there, dressed in a simple uniform. The human was so small compared to the Zorth that Krastel had to squint to see them clearly. "Greetings," the human said, their voice calm and steady. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We request that you state your intentions in this sector of space." There was a moment of silence on the Zorth bridge before it erupted into laughter once again. Krastel had to take several deep breaths before he could respond. "Oh, little human," he said, not bothering to hide his amusement, "our intentions are simple. We are the Zorth Empire, and we are here to claim this sector as our own. Now, run along with your little boats before we decide to swat you like the insects you are." Captain Chen's expression remained neutral. "I'm afraid we can't allow that, Admiral. This sector is under human protection. We ask that you turn your fleet around and leave peacefully." This set off another round of laughter on the Zorth bridge. Some of the officers were practically falling out of their seats. Krastel leaned forward, all 4 of his eyes narrowing. "Listen closely, human. Our smallest ship could crush your entire fleet without breaking a sweat. You have 1 standard rotation to evacuate this sector, or we will remove you by force. And trust me, you don't want that." Captain Chen nodded slowly. "I understand, Admiral. We'll take your words under advisement." Chen out. As the transmission cut off, Krastel turned to his crew, a wide grin on his face. "Well, that was the most fun I've had in cycles. Can you believe the audacity of these humans?" The bridge was still filled with chuckles and snorts. Krastel sat back in his command chair. feeling very pleased with himself. "Set a course to the nearest habitable planet," he ordered. "Let's see if these humans have the courage to stand against us when we start taking their worlds." As the massive Zorkath fleet began to move, Krastel spared one last glance at the tiny human ships on the screen. He shook his head, still smiling. "Humans," he muttered to himself. "They'll make an amusing footnote in the history of our conquest." Little did Admiral Krastel know, his overconfidence was about to lead him and his entire fleet into the fight of their lives. The laughter on the Zorkath bridge would soon be replaced by something very different indeed. Captain Sarah Chen took a deep breath as the communication screen went dark. The Zorkath Admiral's laughter still echoed in her ears. She turned to face her crew on the bridge of the Earth ship Resilient. "Well, that could have gone better," she said, her voice calm despite the tension in the air. Her first officer, Commander James Rodriguez, shook his head. "They're not taking us seriously, Captain. That might work in our favor." Chen nodded. "Agreed. But we need to try diplomacy one more time before things get ugly." She turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Park, send a message to all Earth ships. We're going to Plan B." As Park relayed the orders, Chen looked out at the stars. The massive Zorkath fleet loomed in the distance, their ships like dark mountains against the cosmos. Compared to them, the Earth fleet seemed tiny indeed. But appearances could be deceiving. On the Zorkath flagship, Admiral Krastel was still chuckling to himself when a junior officer approached. "Sir," the officer said, "the human fleet is moving." Krastel waved two of his arms dismissively, probably running away. "I don't blame them." "No, sir," the officer insisted. They're coming towards us." This caught the Admiral's attention. He turned to the main view screen, watching as the small human ships advanced. "Well, well," he muttered. "It seems these humans have some spine after all." The Earth ships moved with surprising speed and grace. They formed a perfect arrowhead formation, with the Resilient at the tip. As they drew closer, Krastel noticed something odd. "Why aren't our long-range sensors getting any readings from them?" he demanded. His science officer looked confused. "I'm not sure, Admiral. It's as if they're not even there." Krastel's amusement began to fade, replaced by a gnawing unease. "Hail them," he ordered. The screen lit up, showing Captain Chen once again. This time, she wasn't alone. Several other humans stood with her, each wearing a different uniform. "Greetings again, Admiral," Chen said. "I hope you've reconsidered your position. Allow me to introduce some of my colleagues." She gestured to a tall man with gray hair. "This is Admiral Yoshida of the Earth Defense Force." Then to a woman in a formal suit. "And this is Ambassador Nkosi of the United Earth Government." Krastel's eyes narrowed. "I thought I made myself clear, human. This sector will be ours." Ambassador Nkosi stepped forward. "Admiral Krastel, we understand that the Zorkath Empire is vast and powerful, but surely there's no need for conflict. We propose a diplomatic solution." Krastel laughed, but it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Diplomacy? You think you can negotiate with the Zorkath Empire?" "We do," Nkosi said firmly. "We're prepared to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, even limited colonization rights. Surely that's preferable to unnecessary bloodshed." For a moment, Krastel was speechless. These humans, in their tiny ships, were offering him terms as if they were equals. The sheer audacity of it was almost admirable. Almost. "You forget your place, humans," Krastel snarled. "We are the Zorkath. We do not negotiate. We conquer." Chen spoke up. "Admiral, please. Think about your crew, your people. Is expansion worth the cost of their lives? Are you threatening me?" Krastel's voice was dangerously low. "Not at all," Chen replied calmly. "I'm simply asking you to consider the consequences of your actions. We don't want to fight, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." Krastel stood up, towering over his own crew. You dare to lecture me on consequences? Let me show you the consequences of defying the Zorkath Empire. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their lead ship. Show these humans what real power looks like. On the Resilient, Chen and her team watched as the Zorkath flagship's weapon systems powered up. It seems diplomacy has failed, Captain, Rodriguez said quietly. Chen nodded, her face grim. So it has. Inform all ships. Execute Protocol Omega. As the orders went out, the human ships began to change. Panels shifted, revealing hidden weapon systems. Energy fields flickered into existence around each vessel, far more advanced than anything the Zorkath had seen before. In the span of a few seconds, the small, seemingly harmless human fleet transformed into a formation of sleek, deadly warships. On the Zorkath bridge, alarms began to blare. The science officer's voice was panicked. Admiral, the human ships, they're not what we thought. Our sensors are detecting energy readings off the charts. Krastel stared at the screen in disbelief. The laughable human fleet had become something else entirely. Something dangerous. For the first time since the encounter began, Admiral Krastel felt a chill of fear run down his spine. He realized, too late, that he had made a terrible mistake. The real battle was about to begin. The space between the Zorkath and human fleets crackled with tension. Admiral Krastel's earlier laughter had died in his throat, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The human ships, once dismissed as insignificant, now bristled with weaponry that his sensors couldn't even fully comprehend. Fire! Krastel bellowed, his forearms gesticulating wildly. Destroy that lead ship now. The Zorkath flagship's main cannon, a weapon that had laid waste to entire planets, blazed to life. A beam of searing energy lanced out across space, aimed directly at the Resilient. On the bridge of the human ship, Captain Chen remained calm. Shields at maximum, she ordered. Brace for impact. The Zorkath beam struck the Resilient head-on. For a moment, the ship disappeared in a blinding flash of light. Krastel leaned forward, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. But as the light faded, his grin faltered. The Resilient still floated there, completely unharmed. A shimmering energy field surrounded it, rippling like water where the beam had struck. Impossible, Krastel whispered. On the Resilient, Chen allowed herself a small smile. Shields holding at 98%, reported her tactical officer. Minimal power drain. Chen nodded. Thank you, Lieutenant. Now, let's show them what we can do. She tapped her comm badge. All ships, you are clear to engage. Remember your training and watch each other's backs. The human fleet sprang into action. They moved with a speed and agility that seemed to defy the laws of physics, quickly splitting into smaller attack groups. The Zorkath, still reeling from the shock of their failed attack, struggled to track the nimble Earth ships. Admiral, cried out a Zorkath officer. The humans are targeting our engines and weapon systems with pinpoint accuracy. How do they know exactly where to hit us? Krastel had no answer. He watched in growing horror as ship after ship in his fleet reported critical damage. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Zorkath vessels outright. Instead, they were systematically disabling them. A series of explosions rocked the flagship. Status report, Krastel demanded. We've lost engines 2 and 3, came the reply. Weapons are down to 60% capacity. Shield generators are straining to compensate. Meanwhile, the Resilient dove and weaved through the Zorkath formation. Chen's voice rang out clear and confident. Target the flagship's main power conduits. Fire when ready. A barrage of energy pulses erupted from the Resilient, each one finding its mark with uncanny precision. The Zorkath flagship shuddered under the assault. Krastel stumbled as his ship took hit after hit. How? He roared. How are they doing this? They're nothing but primitives. On a secondary bridge deep within the Resilient, a team of humans sat connected to complex-looking machines. Their eyes were closed, but their minds were racing. Through their neural links, they guided the fleet's weapons with inhuman accuracy, processing battlefield data faster than any computer. Synapse Team Alpha reporting. One of them spoke, her voice monotone. Enemy flagship's defenses are down to 40%. Calculating next strike points. Back on the main bridge, Chen received the update. Good work, Synapse Team. Keep it up. She turned to her first officer. Commander Rodriguez, status of the rest of the Zorth fleet. Rodriguez grinned. They're in disarray, Captain. Our Wolfpack squadrons have taken out the engines on most of their capital ships. The smaller vessels are trying to regroup, but our ECM is keeping them confused. Chen nodded, satisfied. The battle was going even better than they had hoped. The Zorth's overconfidence had left them completely unprepared for the true capabilities of human technology and tactics. On the Zorth flagship, alarms blared as systems failed one by one. Krastel's bridge was filled with smoke and the cries of injured crew members. Admiral, his second-in-command said, voice shaking. We need to retreat. We can't win this. Krastel's pride warred with his instinct for survival. He looked at the view screen, watching as his mighty armada was being systematically taken apart by a force he had laughed at mere hours ago. With a heavy heart, he gave the order he never thought he'd have to give. All ships, retreat. Get us out of here. As the Zorth fleet began to turn tail, their engines sputtering and sparking, the human ships held their fire. Captain Chen watched the retreat with a mixture of relief and sadness. Stand down weapons, she ordered. Let them go. The first battle was over. Humanity had stood its ground and emerged victorious. But Chen knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon know that humans were a force to be reckoned with. And somewhere out there, a humiliated Zorth admiral was already planning his revenge. As the Zorth fleet retreated, leaving a trail of damaged ships and debris, Captain Sarah Chen knew the fight was far from over. She turned to her crew on the bridge of the Resilient, her face serious. Good work, everyone, she said. But let's not celebrate yet. They'll be back, and they'll be angry. Commander Rodriguez nodded. What's our next move, Captain? Chen's eyes narrowed. We show them exactly what humanity is capable of. Prepare for Phase 2. Across the human fleet, crews sprang into action. Ships that seemed to have taken damage during the battle suddenly repaired themselves, nanobots swarming over their hulls. Others changed shape, transforming from sleek destroyers into bulky repair vessels or agile fighters. On the Resilient, Chen watched as her flagship underwent its own transformation. Activate the chameleon system, she ordered. The ship's exterior shimmered and then seemed to vanish, blending perfectly with the starry background. To any observer, it would appear as if the Resilient had simply disappeared. Meanwhile, deep in Zorth territory, Admiral Krastel nursed his wounded pride. His once mighty fleet limped towards a repair station, but his mind was already plotting revenge. I want every scrap of information we have on these humans, he growled to his officers. And get me reinforcements. We'll crush them with sheer numbers if we have to. But as the Zorth prepared for round 2, the humans were already several steps ahead. Back in the contested sector, Chen's invisible fleet was hard at work. Specialized ships deployed massive energy nets, creating a web of sensors that could detect the slightest disturbance in spacetime. Energy net is online, Captain, reported Lieutenant Park. We'll know the moment they enter the sector. Chen nodded. Good. Now let's give them a proper welcome. Deploy the Nemesis units. From the cargo bays of several ships, small, spherical objects were launched into space. These were the Nemesis units, nano-enhanced multi-purpose espionage and sabotage intelligence systems. Each one was no bigger than a human fist, but packed with technology far beyond anything the Zorth had ever seen. As the Nemesis units spread out, Chen turned to her science officer. Dr. Yukimura, how are the quantum entanglement communicators holding up? The scientist smiled. Perfect, Captain. We're maintaining instantaneous communication with Earth Command, and all our ships, regardless of distance. The Zorkath won't be able to intercept or jam our signals." Just then, an alert sounded. Lieutenant Park's eyes widened. "Captain, we're detecting a massive spatial distortion. It looks like, my God, it's an entire Zorkath armada." The view screen lit up, showing hundreds of Zorkath ships pouring into the sector. At their head was a behemoth of a vessel, easily 10 times the size of Krastel's previous flagship. Chen's expression remained calm. "Right on schedule. All ships, initiate Protocol Omega-2. Let's show them what we've got." As the Zorkath armada advanced, confident in their overwhelming numbers, they suddenly found themselves under attack from an enemy they couldn't even see. Nemesis units attached themselves to Zorkath ships, burrowing through hulls and infiltrating systems. Within minutes, entire squadrons of alien vessels found their weapons and engines disabled, their crews unable to understand what was happening. Admiral Krastel, standing on the bridge of his new super-dreadnought, watched in disbelief as chaos unfolded around him. "What is happening?" he roared. "Where are they? How are they doing this?" His officers had no answers. Their sensors, despite being upgraded after the last encounter, still couldn't detect the human ships. It was as if they were fighting ghosts. Suddenly, the space in front of Krastel's ship shimmered, and the Resilient appeared out of nowhere, its weapons primed and ready. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," her voice boomed across all Zorkath communication channels. "Your fleet is disabled. Your technology is outmatched. Surrender now, or face the consequences." Krastel's 4 eyes bulged in fury and fear. He had brought an armada, thinking to overwhelm the humans with brute force. Instead, he found his mighty fleet rendered helpless by an enemy he still couldn't fully comprehend. As Chen awaited the Zorkath response, she allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had faced countless challenges in its journey to the stars, each one forcing them to adapt, to innovate, to push the boundaries of what was possible. Now, those hard-earned lessons were paying off. The battle wasn't over yet, but one thing was clear. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was a force unlike any it had ever seen before. Admiral Krastel's 4 eyes darted frantically across his command screens. His mighty armada, once the pride of the Zorkath Empire, was now in complete disarray. Ships floated helplessly in space, their systems corrupted by the tiny Nemesis units. Others fired wildly at empty space, their sensors confused by human stealth technology. "Status report." Krastel bellowed, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. His second in command, visibly shaken, responded, "Admiral, we've lost control of 60% of our fleet. The rest are barely functioning. We can't fight like this." Krastel slammed his fists on the control panel. "Impossible. We outnumber them 10 to 1. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Resilient, Captain Sarah Chen watched the chaos with a calm demeanor. She turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Raj Patel. "Lieutenant, it's time for Formation Delta. Let's show them what real tactics look like." Patel nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "Aye, Captain. Transmitting orders now." Across the human fleet, ships began to move in perfect synchronization. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a beautiful dance. But this was a deadly ballet, choreographed with lethal precision. The Resilient took point, suddenly visible as it deactivated its cloaking device. 5 other ships decloaked around it, forming a perfect hexagon. As one, they accelerated towards the heart of the Zorkath fleet. Krastel watched in disbelief as the tiny human formation approached. "Destroy them," he screamed. "All functioning ships, concentrate fire on that formation." But as the remaining Zorkath ships opened fire, something extraordinary happened. The human ships moved in perfect unison, constantly rotating their positions. One moment, the Resilient was at the front. The next, it was protected in the center. Energy shields flared as they absorbed hits, the load shared across all 6 ships. Incredible. whispered Dr. Yukimura on the Resilience Bridge. The Synapse team is outdoing themselves. Their neural link is allowing our ships to move as one organism. Chen nodded, pride evident in her voice. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to work together. Now let's take it up a notch. Initiate swarm protocol. At her command, dozens of smaller craft poured out from the larger human ships. These were the hummingbirds, highly maneuverable fighter craft piloted by AI with human oversight. They zipped between the lumbering Zorkath vessels, their energy weapons precisely targeting weak points. In the Synapse chamber, the linked humans guided this complex dance of ships and fighters. Their minds, connected by advanced technology, processed battlefield information at incredible speeds. They anticipated Zorkath movements, coordinated attacks, and adjusted defenses in real time. Back on the Zorkath flagship, Krastal watched helplessly as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans moved with a coordination he had never seen before. It was as if their entire fleet was one giant organism, every part working in perfect harmony. "How?" he muttered. "How can they be so unified?" On the Resilient, Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Commander Rodriguez, status report." Rodriguez's voice was filled with excitement. "Captain, it's working perfectly. The Zorkath fleet is in complete disarray. Their command structure is breaking down. They can't cope with our level of coordination." Chen nodded. "Good. Now for the final push. All ships, execute maneuver Omega." The human fleet suddenly split into 3 groups. One continued its assault on the main Zorkath force. Another broke off to round up the disabled Zorkath ships. The third, led by the Resilient, headed straight for Krastal's flagship. As they approached, Chen opened a channel to the Zorkath admiral. "Admiral Krastal, this is your final warning. Surrender now, or we will be forced to destroy your ship." On his bridge, Krastal slumped in his command chair. His mighty armada was in ruins, outmaneuvered and outfought by an enemy he had grossly underestimated. He looked at his terrified crew, then back at the approaching human ships, moving with that uncanny coordination. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Krastal of the Zorkath Empire realized he had no choice. With a heavy heart and wounded pride, he gave the order he never thought he'd give. "All ships, stand down. We surrender." As the message was relayed across the battlefield, the human fleet ceased fire. On the Resilient, Captain Chen let out a long breath. They had won, not through brute force, but through superior tactics, technology, and teamwork. The battle was over, but as Chen looked out at the stars, she knew that humanity's journey was just beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers alike. But as long as humans stood together, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. The silence that followed the Zorkath surrender was deafening. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Resilient, her eyes fixed on the view screen showing the defeated Zorkath fleet. The turning point of the battle had come, and with it, a shift in the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. "Captain," Commander Rodriguez said, breaking the silence, "the Zorkath flagship is hailing us." Chen nodded, her face a mask of calm professionalism. On screen, "Commander." The image of Admiral Krastal appeared, his blue-green skin pale with shock and defeat. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in his species. "Captain Chen," Krastal said, his voice hoarse, I wish to discuss the terms of our surrender." Chen's voice was firm but not unkind. "Of course, Admiral. But first, I think it's time we had a real conversation, one without threats or posturing." Krastal nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Yes, I believe you're right." As arrangements were made for the Zorkath leadership to board the Resilient, Chen turned to her crew. "This is a delicate situation. We've won the battle, but now we need to win the peace." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Security teams prepared for the Zorkath arrival, Diplomats were consulted via quantum entanglement communicators, and the fleet maintained its vigilance in case of any last-minute treachery. Finally, Admiral Krastel and his top officers were escorted onto the Resilience conference room. The Zorkath looked around in barely concealed awe at the advanced technology surrounding them. Chen sat at the head of the table, with Commander Rodriguez and Dr. Yukimura flanking her. She gestured for the Zorkath to take their seats. Admiral Krastel, Chen began, I hope now you understand that the galaxy is larger and more complex than you previously believed. Krastel nodded, his voice subdued. Indeed, Captain. We have clearly underestimated your species. How is it possible that we've never heard of humans before? How have you achieved such technological prowess? Chen smiled slightly. Admiral, humanity has learned through bitter experience that it's often better to be underestimated. We've been watching the galaxy for centuries, preparing, learning, adapting. Today was simply the day we decided it was time to step onto the galactic stage. Dr. Yukimura spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. Your empire's expansion forced our hand, Admiral. We couldn't stand by and watch as you conquered peaceful worlds. Krastel's second-in-command, still struggling to comprehend their defeat, burst out. But how? How did you defeat us so easily? Our fleet was vast, our weapons powerful. Chen's eyes hardened slightly. Because, Commander, we didn't rely solely on size or power. We used our minds. We worked together. Every ship, every crew member, even our allies, all working in perfect harmony. That's humanity's true strength. She stood up, pacing slowly around the table. We've faced extinction on our homeworld more times than I can count. Each crisis forced us to adapt, to think creatively, to push the boundaries of what's possible. The technology you saw today, that's the result of humanity's relentless drive to survive and thrive. Krastel listened, his earlier dismissive attitude replaced by grudging respect. And now, what happens to the Zorkath Empire? Chen sat back down, leaning forward. That, Admiral, is largely up to you. We're not conquerors. We don't want to destroy your empire or subjugate your people. What we want is peace. Real, lasting peace. She tapped a control, and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared above the table. We're proposing a new galactic order. One based on cooperation, not conquest. Where species work together to explore the universe, to solve its mysteries, to face its dangers united. Krastel and his officers exchanged looks of surprise. This was not the ultimatum they had expected from their conquerors. It won't be easy, Chen continued. Centuries of empire building have left their mark, but we believe it's possible. The Zorkath can be part of this new future, Admiral, if you choose to be. For a long moment, Krastel was silent, his four eyes darting between Chen, the hologram, and his own officers. Then, slowly, he nodded. Captain Chen, he said, his voice gaining strength, I believe you've given us much to think about. Perhaps it's time for the Zorkath to learn some new ways. As the negotiations continued into the night, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. A new chapter in galactic history had begun, sparked by humanity's surprise emergence. The turning point had come, and with it, hope for a better future for all species. 3 months had passed since the historic battle between the human fleet and the Zorkath Empire. The sector of space that had once been a war zone was now bustling with activity of a different kind. Ships from various species darted back and forth, carrying diplomats, scientists, and traders. At the center of it all floated a massive space station, hastily constructed through the combined efforts of humans and Zorkath. It was a symbol of their newfound cooperation, a neutral ground where the future of the galaxy was being shaped. Captain Sarah Chen stood at a large window on the station, gazing out at the stars. Her ship, the Resilient, was docked nearby, undergoing repairs and upgrades. The past months had been a whirlwind of negotiations, explanations, and introductions as humanity stepped fully onto the galactic stage. Quite a view, isn't it? A familiar voice said behind her. Chen turned to see Admiral Krastel approaching. The Zorkath leader looked different now. Less imposing, perhaps, but with a newfound wisdom in his 4 eyes. Admiral, Chen nodded in greeting. I was just thinking about how much has changed. Krastel joined her at the window. Indeed, if someone had told me 3 months ago that I'd be standing here, working alongside humans to reshape the galaxy, I would have laughed them out of the airlock. Chen smiled. And if someone had told me we'd be revealing ourselves to the galaxy so soon, I might have done the same. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Yukimura and a Zorkath scientist named Zexera. The odd pair had been working tirelessly to combine human and Zorkath technologies. Captain, Admiral, Yukimura said excitedly, we've had a breakthrough in the quantum entanglement communications. With Zexera's insights into subspace mechanics, we think we can extend the range tenfold. Zexera nodded enthusiastically. It's remarkable how our different approaches to science complement each other. There's so much we can learn from one another. As the scientists launched into a technical discussion, Chen caught Krastel's eye. They shared a knowing look. This was exactly the kind of cooperation they had hoped for. Elsewhere on the station, Commander Rodriguez was leading a mixed team of human and Zorkath tactical officers in a simulation exercise. The Zorkath were learning about human-style adaptability and teamwork, while the humans were gaining insights into Zorkath battle strategies honed over centuries of empire building. Excellent work, everyone, Rodriguez said as the simulation ended. Remember, our strength lies not in overwhelming force, but in our ability to adapt and work together. A young Zorkath officer raised her hand. Commander, I must admit, I'm still amazed at how quickly humans can shift tactics. How do you train for every possible scenario? Rodriguez smiled. We don't. We train to think on our feet, to communicate effectively, and to trust each other. That's what allows us to handle whatever the universe throws at us. As the day wore on, more and more ships arrived at the station. Representatives from dozens of species, some previously subjugated by the Zorkath, others hidden like humanity had been, came to join the discussions about the galaxy's future. In a large conference room, Ambassador Nkosi of Earth stood before a diverse audience. Friends, allies, fellow sentients, she began, we stand at a crossroads. The old way of conquest and domination has led only to suffering. We propose a new path, one of cooperation, mutual respect, and shared discovery. She gestured to the stars visible through the window. The universe is vast and full of wonders and dangers. United, we can explore its mysteries and face its challenges. Divided, we will fall. As Nkosi spoke, Chen and Krastel watched from the back of the room. You know, Krastel said quietly, when we first met, I thought humans were insignificant. I've never been so glad to be proven wrong. Chen nodded, and we thought the Zorkath were just conquerors. I'm glad we were wrong too. As the speech ended to thunderous applause, Chen's communicator beeped. A message from Earth Command. New anomalies detected at the edge of known space. Something big was coming. Chen looked at Krastel, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Well, Admiral, it seems the universe has more surprises in store. Ready for another adventure? Krastel straightened, a newfound determination in his stance. With humanity as allies. Always. As they moved to inform the others, both Chen and Krastel knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Humanity had changed the galaxy, but in doing so, they had also been changed. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. It would be one hell of a ride.